Hello, everyone. This is Brandon Elrich with Brandon Elrich is So Gay. This is episode 27 of my podcast. First, I want to apologize because I've been putting out live videos and I thought they were being uploaded to all the platforms from my Substack, but it doesn't look like the audio is transferring to all of the different audio podcast platforms. I thought that's the way it was supposed to work, but little by little, I'm learning different things about the platform. So, if you haven't been able to listen to the audio version of some of my live broadcasts, sorry about that. You can visit Brandon Elrich is So Gay on Substack, and you can watch all the live feeds. You can also listen to them on the Substack app. But if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or somewhere else, you may not be able to just listen to the audio version. So anyway, I recorded one last week. I did a live broadcast with Fusen Aiden, and we talked about our Pridefest experiences, different ones. And I labeled that as episode 26. And I thought that would get uploaded, the audio version, again, but apparently that didn't happen. So anyway, moving on. I'm labeling this as episode 27, either way. And if you want to catch all of my content, you can go to my Substack page. It's easier just to search for Brandon Elrich is So Gay. The Substack is brandonelrich.substack.com, but that's a little more difficult to remember. So however you want to get there is fine. So during the month of June, and into July, I was on a Midwest Pride tour. I've been talking about it a lot leading up to June, trying to drum up viewers, create interest for it. So that ended not last weekend, the weekend before. The first one that I went to was KC Pridefest in Kansas City, Missouri. That was June. It occurred June 6th through the 8th. I went there on June the 7th, which was the day that they had their Pride Parade. Went there in the morning with my friend Allie. She's been on the podcast a few different times. And it was a great parade. It's the first time I had been to the Kansas City parade. There were many years that they didn't even have one. But it was a decent size. There were a lot of people that showed up. I went on a podcast called Gen Xy. They do a show called The Daily Whatever. And they brought me on as a guest, and I got to show them a few minutes of the parade. And then it started pouring down rain. There was a chance for rain, and I knew that, but it was less than a 50% chance. But of course, it did rain on the parade. But it kept going anyway. The band members had all their horns wrapped in plastic to protect them, and people wearing ponchos and had umbrellas and everything. And it turned out it was fine. I went under the awning of a nearby cafe, and I was still able to see the parade. It was just right there by the sidewalk, right by the street. So I was still able to watch it and not get completely drenched because I did have my phone. I was taking pictures, doing video and everything. So it stopped. The rain stopped partway through the parade, so that was great. Headed over to the Pridefest grounds, did my live video, talked to several people. It was great. It was lots of fun. It was kind of muddy, so my rainbow shoes got kind of dirty. Had to wash them later. But I was wearing a mesh top and shorts, so I didn't have a lot to get wet. It was fine. The weather, the temperature at least, was nice. During the summer in Missouri, it can get pretty hot and humid. And last year it was pretty hot at the end of June or through June. But this year it was pretty nice. So that was my experience with KC Pride Fest. The following weekend, I traveled down to Springfield, Missouri, and that was what they called Ozarks Pride Fest. That was on the 14th, and they had a pride parade then. That was also the day that we had across the U.S. we had the No Kings protests, where people went out in large numbers and had protests kind of against the administration, Trump in particular, saying that they didn't want to go back to a monarchy. We didn't want a king. We wanted to stay a democracy. So I was in Springfield during that. There were some No Kings protesters there. They were part of the parade. There were some people were downtown holding signs and things. It was a really cool parade. They had a nice parade. The Pride Fest was not too large. It was in a really nice area downtown. There was a kind of a square, lots of trees and shade, so that was really nice. There were several vendors. It didn't cost anything to get in, which was great. Now, Kansas City Pride Fest, it cost $10 before tax, but Springfield didn't charge anything. They also didn't have any security checks, which I was really surprised about. And Kansas City did. They limited the size of the bags that you were carrying in. You were supposed to only have clear bags, and if you didn't, they asked you to dump out your bag or allowed them to search it, that kind of thing. Ozarks Pride Fest didn't have any of that. They did have police walking around the grounds, so there was some security there, but they just didn't have a checkpoint. But as far as I ever heard, nothing happened as far as anything dangerous. It was a really cool experience. I got my face painted, got some glitter in my hair. I talked to a few people there. Talked to the lady that painted my face. She was part of a church organization, a very open and welcoming church, and she talked about her daughter who came out to her and how she accepted her and everything. And it was a really touching story. I posted that on my Substack also if you want to see that video. So I had a lot of fun down there. I went by myself. It was just one day. The following weekend, I was planning on going to Chicago Pride. I've always heard that was a pretty huge one. That one and San Francisco are pretty big ones. But traveling to Chicago is kind of a pretty long drive for me, and I figured I would probably need to stay somewhere there. So the cost of the travel, staying overnight, it was just too much especially when I was doing all this other traveling. So I had to cut that out due to my budget. Instead, I went to Topeka, and they had their Pride Palooza, is what they were calling it. Topeka is the home of the Westboro Baptist Church, which is infamous for protesting against the queer community. And I went to the church there, and across the church, I took pictures of a picture of the church and of the houses across the street, which were the Equality House and the Mott House. The Equality House is painted rainbow colors, and they're a welcoming, affirming house that holds drag shows, gay weddings, fundraisers, that kind of thing. And they bought the house specifically right across from the Westboro Baptist Church because of their known hatred for groups like that. And the one right beside it is called the Mott House, and it's painted the colors of the trans flag. It's a pretty cool place. I was able to take my picture in front of the Equality House, and then went to the Pride Palooza, which was downtown Topeka. It was very small. It was the smallest one I'd ever been to, but this is only their second year doing it. There weren't a whole lot of vendors there, but I talked to a couple of them. I filmed part of the drag show that they had on stage. That was cool. They had a splash pad going on because it was fairly warm. They held it in the evening, so they kind of beat the heat in some ways, but it was still fairly humid out. The splash pad really helped with that. I walked through it a couple times, got a little bit wet. It's fine. It was a cool town. I had never been to Topeka before. It was nice. We went to a restaurant there. Really cool. I enjoyed it. I went with my friend Allie. She joined me for that one. She had never been to Topeka before either, so this is a new experience for both of us. The following weekend, the 27th through the 9th, was STL Pridefest, St. Louis, Missouri. So I went, Allie went with me to that. She didn't go to the Pride Fest. I went by myself to the Pride Fest while she explored other things. There's a city museum that's really cool there. St. Louis is a pretty cool town, pretty cool city. The Gateway Arch, of course, is there. And they've got a nice botanical garden. They've got a lot of stuff to see. But I went to the Pride Fest. I did my live video there. And it was cool. I've been there the 2 years prior to that, I believe. No, wait. I went in 2019. And then, yeah, I've been there. This has been my third or fourth year there. Now I can't remember. Fourth year, I think. Yeah. Not in a row, but because in 2020, of course, everything was shut down and nobody was having in-person Pride Fests in public. So, yeah, I went to St. Louis, talked to a few vendors there, a caricature artist. It was cool. Now, St. Louis is the only place that I saw protesters, at least protesters against Pride Fest. I heard somebody on a megaphone. I went toward it to see what was going on, and they were outside the Pride Fest gates across the street, and there was a guy with a megaphone and a few people with signs, going to hell kind of signs, that kind of thing, and the guy on the megaphone was reciting Bible verses. But I think there were like 7 people there holding signs. But that's the only place that I ever saw any protesters, which was very surprising to me. I especially thought I'd see some either in the Ozarks or in Topeka. Not even the Westboro Baptist Church showed up around Topeka. And it may be because there are city ordinances. I know there are some laws that were passed that the protesters had to stand out, like a certain distance away from any funerals or events they were protesting. So that might have kept them away. I don't know, but even at a distance, I never saw any, which was great. Um, so St. Louis, yes, and then not the following weekend. The following weekend was 4th of July, and no Pride Fests were going on that weekend that I knew of, at least in the Midwest, because that's where I was focusing my tour. On July 12th, I went to Omaha, Nebraska for their Heartland Pride Fest. Heartland Pride Fest was the only one that I've been to that was indoor. There was a very large convention center, the CHI Health Center. They have a convention center there that houses concerts and events and things like that. That's where this was. They, again, very much like Kansas City, they had a security checkpoint where they only allowed certain size bags, and I didn't realize it. And I went there with my bag. It's a very small across the shoulder, crossbody bag, and I had to go. I walked there from the hotel that I was staying in, and of course, they wouldn't let me in because of the size of the bag. I had to walk all the way back to the hotel, dump everything out of my bag, and just take the essentials that I was going to use, because I had a microphone and an external battery because I was going to do my live video. Oh, it was very inconvenient, but I got it done. I walked all the way back. Oh no, I didn't walk back. I got a shuttle, because the hotel offered a free shuttle anywhere within a 4-mile radius. So that was cool. Went back, talked to a few people on the live video. I talked to the Parasol Patrol, which was an organization that helps kind of protect kids from protesters and haters. People in the queer community often get attacked, whether physically, verbally, always emotionally. But they were a group helping to try to combat that, to protect kids from that kind of hatred. I talked to a couple of other vendors as well, and it was a cool place. You might think being indoor that it was a small venue, but the place, like I said, it was very large. It was a very large convention center, very open. There was on one end of the venue, there was a roller derby going on. I took some video when I was on my live video. It was just starting when I was starting my video, so I took some video of that. Talked to some people, got a bunch of free stuff. It was pretty nice. I enjoyed it. The being indoor, one advantage was that we didn't have to deal with the weather. It wasn't raining or anything that day, but just in case, that was a nice feature. The weather wasn't bad. It was pretty nice out. Went to the Gene Leahy Park. It was a very large park with big slides and oversized porch swings. It's right by the river. I believe it's the Missouri River. I should have looked that up before I got on here. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it's right by the riverfront, and there's lots of cool sculptures and trees, a green space. There was outdoor music going on. There was a stage. They often have live performances there. Very cool place. Also walked downtown. It was kind of an old-fashioned downtown. They had brick streets. I always love that. Anytime a town can preserve some of their old buildings and old streets, original brick. I always love that. It's just so cool. There were a couple of horse-drawn carriages. They were giving rides. Well, you had to pay for them, but that was pretty cool. We were Allie went with me, and we were going to do a carriage ride, but there was a line, and we didn't want to just stand around until these rides ended. So we walked around and saw a guy with a couple. Actually, it was 2 or 3 people. They had very large boa constrictors, and Allie volunteered me to hold one of them. So that was interesting. I put a video up on it on my Substack. It was a large yellow boa constrictor. So that was interesting. Went to a candy shop, ice cream place. The ice cream was awesome. There was a long line out there outside of the building of the ice cream place. We were willing to stand in line for the ice cream. Not so much for the horse-drawn carriage, but I love ice cream, so I'm always willing to wait for a little while to get my ice cream. It was an awesome town. We also went to the Joslyn Art Museum in Omaha. It was free, which was a great benefit. I tried to mind my budget as much as I can, and with all this travel and everything, that was really necessary. And by the way, if you haven't become a paid subscriber, I would really appreciate that. If you go to my Substack, you can go to any of my articles. At the bottom, you can click the subscribe button. And you can do it for $30 for the whole year during the month of July, or the full price of $60 for the year, or just $6 a month. I would really appreciate your support. I offer my content for free, but if you enjoy my content, I ask that you help support me. I would really appreciate it. So anyway, back to my little story. What was I saying? We went to the museum. Yes. The museum was really cool. It had a combination of a lot of older art and contemporary modern art. It had a little bit of everything. It was very cool. We took a tour. A couple ladies, volunteers, gave us a tour. They were very knowledgeable about the pieces. We had some great discussions. They told us, and now they might tell a lot of people this, but they said we were one of their favorite groups all year. So, but I kind of believe them, because they said sometimes there are people that just don't like to talk, and I can see that definitely. So we just happened to have in our group, there were a lot of people who were open to discussing the art. It was really cool. So we kind of wanted to go see the Omaha Zoo, because I've heard from many people that Omaha Zoo is one of the best in the country. But it costs like $31 to get into the zoo, and the museum was free. So choosing between those and looking at the budget, of course, we chose the museum. But it was I don't regret that decision. I think it was great. I would still like to go back. Omaha, one thing that surprised me about Omaha was how much there was to do there. If you think of Nebraska, one of their slogans is, Nebraska, honestly, it's not for everyone. And I just love that. I think that's so funny. So it's part of the Midwest. Nebraska is known for their cornfields, basically. It's a very flat place. It's part of the plains area. in the United States, in the Midwest. But Omaha was an awesome city. I loved it. I would really like to go back. I want to go back to the zoo at some point. Maybe next time I go, I'll be able to afford it. Maybe I'll go back to Pride Fest next year and be able to visit the zoo when I get gain more paid subscribers. I can maybe afford to do a little more. This year, I decided to focus my Pride tour on the Midwest because that's basically where I am. So I knew that traveling wouldn't be too difficult. I was able to go to Topeka and Springfield in a day trip, and of course Kansas City also. So, I didn't have to spend money on a hotel. There was still gas prices, of course, but that's just how it is. And one thing that I noticed that all the Pride Fest had in common was the friendliness of the people. No matter where I was, I always encountered such great people. They were so friendly and welcoming and considerate. Everybody I talked to, I didn't encounter any rude or disrespectful people. I I was I guess it's kind of strange to be in shock about that because I mean, you've probably heard of like Southern charm, and Midwest kind of is known for their uh, their friendliness overall. But as far as the queer community goes, they're not quite as accepting as some other places, like of course the West Coast and the New England area. But what I saw in the Midwest at all the Pride celebrations were warm, friendly people, and it was awesome. So next year, I want to expand my tour, or at least move my tour to another area. I would like to explore maybe, I don't know, Pride Fest in the South or the Southwest. I've never been to Arizona or New Mexico, Texas, never been to any of those places. I think it would be cool to go down there and see how Pride is celebrated in other states. I think it would be really cool to eventually hit every state. I don't know if that'll all work out. Some of that will depend on my my listeners, my viewers, my subscribers. So, anyway, that was the end of my Midwest Pride tour for this year. Well, actually, okay, I take that back. Because there is one in Columbia, Missouri in October. So I might go to that one. But for the most part, the Midwest Pride Tour kind of ended right after June. But yeah, I guess you could say there's maybe a hiatus and then one more bonus stop in October. So I'll let you know if I'm going to be going to that one, and I will broadcast live there. I hope you will go to my Substack page, check out my other stuff. I don't only do podcast episodes, I write articles. I'm often a guest on different live videos. If you want to check out any of those, I hope you do. Hope you enjoy it. So yeah, that's the end of this episode as far as I can think of. I think that's all that I wanted to hit. I hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed my recap of my Pride Tour. And until next time, say goodbye, Zach.